If you currently run Facebook ads or you're considering it, I want you to watch this video because in this video, I'm going to break down the secrets and truth behind the almighty algorithm. If you've ever run Facebook advertising, you already know sometimes it feels like you're in a boxing match with Zuckerberg. But in this video, I'm going to break down what does the algorithm actually look for, what do I and my team actually do ahead of time to make sure we're leveraging it, and ultimately, how should you look at audience targeting, creative testing, and much more. Well, welcome to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Ashton Shanks, and in a past life, I was known as the most savage motherfucker in media buying. My career has been developed off of hundreds of millions of dollars and overseen ad spend managed, and I currently operate as co-CEO and co-founder of Bad Marketing. We are a team of nearly 200 people. We manage over $10 million a month in ad spend across Meta, Google, YouTube, and TikTok, and we operate in industries like e-commerce, local business, and information and coaching products. So if you're going to dive into advertising on any level, it's very important that you understand its algorithm. And when I say algorithm, what I mean is it's this fancy little formula for how that platform decides what advertisers' ad gets placed where and when. If you're going to get started on media buying, specifically with Meta, it's important to understand two things. One, its algorithm, and two, its auction place. What I mean is this platform, like most social media platforms, is developed off of an auction, meaning advertisers like you and me will compete against each other in an auction to see whose ad gets placed when and where. Ultimately, what decides the winner in the auction is off of three criteria: bid, expected action rate, and ad quality. As Meta is evaluating who should win the auction, get their ad placed where and when, they use these criteria to determine who actually gets that placement. Now, the next question is though, how do you know what auctions to really enter? As an advertiser, you don't specifically get to choose individual auctions to enter. They use their algorithm to ultimately decide who enters what auction. This algorithm is a very complex machine learning based formula based on advertiser history, based on market competition, based on placements, and ultimately based on user relevance to decide what auctions each advertiser actually enters. And in today's world, they are constantly updating this algorithm to try to get better performance and throughput for their advertisers. This algorithm will learn so much information about users, the sites they visit, their interests, their likes, their dislikes, and then also use information from the advertisers like the creatives they're using, advertiser history, the copy, what pages they're sending people to, and they use this mix of a formula to decide ultimately the ads that you see on your feed today. Now the next question is, how do you actually develop ads to best perform within the auction place and the algorithm? And this comes down to very important factors. A, have deep understandings of your market and what actually gets their attention, what causes them to convert. Understand that social media advertising or advertising on Instagram, TikTok, Google, whatever, it is social-based platforms unless you're using Google search PPC. But if you're on YouTube, it's still a social platform, meaning people are often coming to those platforms not to be sold by ads, but actually to be entertained or educated. So as an advertiser, your goal is to understand what your market reacts to and develop content to get their attention, but ultimately create enough curiosity and enough desire to get them to the landing page to offer them what you're trying to sell. A few important reminders here is that if you want to develop great content, great creative, understand that most of the world operates in video. Using video with proper placement formats, meaning if you're advertising to a story, to have story-based video creative, if you have feeds, to make sure all of your creative has the proper formats so that when you're getting delivered into a placement or an auction, it feels native. It doesn't feel disruptive. I find the best ads that perform today are the ones that don't actually feel like ads, but rather they either feel like entertaining or educational content that the user would normally be looking for. The more you can tap into what they're liking and consuming already, the better your advertising typically performs. Now, when I say format, I mean this in actually two different ways. The first thing is just the typical actual format of the video, meaning 9:16 if you're going for story-based content, 1080 by 1080 if you want to appear in the feeds and take up the most real estate. It's important to look up what different placements your platform provides and make sure every single time you're launching a piece of creative that you have it formatted for each individual placement. This way, whenever your ad actually appears, no matter what placement it shows up as, it feels native and doesn't feel disruptive in a bad way when they see your ad. The next style of format I mean though, is making sure that your creative actually follows a very persuasive structure within the video if you're actually using content. meaning you typically want a very strong hook that catches attention and disruption, followed by immediately calling out either a pain or the desire that your product or service can fulfill, followed typically by layers of proof, UGC, demonstration, and a guarantee or risk reversal. Using proper formats, not just physically by what does the content look like, but also structurally through how are we creating this persuasion argument, is key to developing great formats for your creative. Now moving on to the next section, at the end of the day, the right offer plus the right audience equals the conversion or the success you're looking for. So we've kind of talked a little bit about the right offer, at least dabbled into the how do you convey that message or offer, but what is really important is to also make sure you're talking to the right audience. Now in the media buying world today, there's so many different disagreements or beliefs or strategies on how should you look for audiences, how should you ultimately develop campaigns, and what I have found to lead to the best success is to never think that there is one strategy to fit all. What I've also found is that if you spend enough money on a single account, you'll realistically need to tap into different strategies and different tactics if you want to find success. Here's what I mean. By and large, the media buying strategies that have worked over the years have adapted and changed. If you go back 4 or 5 years, you would have found hyper-segmented audience testing to be very effective, but as we've seen things progress, especially after iOS 14, things have needed to go broader and broader to actually see success at scale. However, this does not mean the strategies in the past no longer work. In fact, what I have found that different accounts will respond differently to different strategies and tactics. Here are a few examples of these tactics. First strategy is completely broad. This means no targeting, no audience segmentation, realistically no exclusions, and you're just letting the algorithm go to work. The next strategy is typically known as stacked. Stacking essentially means that you're taking groups of interests or groups of audiences and putting them together to make that ad set or the audience larger. Example, if I have one audience that's 2 million in size and I bring another audience that's 2 million in size and I stack them together in one ad set, now I have a 4 million sized audience group. This will give Meta more room to actually optimize and find potential customers. The next strategy is segmented, which means rather than having stacked audiences together, we're actually going in individual audience basis to find winning audiences and scaling those individual ad sets up. Now, a lot of media buyers will claim one way is better than another, but again, I have actual proof that this is not necessarily true. Accounts respond to different tactics in different ways. You might find one account does really well broad, and that same account does really terribly segmented, and the vice versa on another account, where it actually responds much better to hyper-segmented audiences versus leaving it broad. Also, I found other accounts that if you spend enough money in one single account, you actually have to have multiple different tactics going in the same account to find different pockets of efficiency. The moral of the story here is to make sure you're testing different strategies and tactics and never just think that one strategy fits all at all times. If you're curious about how do you actually even start testing audiences or where should you begin, think of it this way. I like to break up my audience testing or audience segments into 4 main quadrants. The first thing is competitors. If I can target competitors, those are typically really great audiences to target. The next thing is typically publications, meaning what does your ideal market spend time reading? I like this because reading typically takes much more time and bandwidth versus just watching a TV show or a favorite movie. But if I can understand what books or what authors or what publications like magazines they're reading and paying attention to, those are really great audiences to start targeting. The next area that I really like to look at is thought leaders or influencers within that given industry. Meaning, if I know that my audience is filled with entrepreneurs and they love reading, then I might target people like Robert Kiyosaki or Jim Rohn, influencers that I know they'd be paying attention to. The next thing is typically when I break down into demographics targeting. This is where I start targeting either their jobs, fields of study, interests of things that they like to research, or activities that they might be having, like small business owner behaviors. Demographics is a little bit more broader, but I've often found great success when targeting. So whenever I jump into a new account and I start wanting to find out which audiences I should be paying more attention to or maybe testing further, I'll start by creating a campaign that targets each one of those audience segments and ultimately figuring out which one my current audience responds to more. Let's say, for example, example, I found in this one that influencers and thought leaders was performing better or showing signs of greater success, that's when I'd start paying attention to what other influencers or thought leaders I can start testing. Now that you start to understand, okay, these are the audiences I want to start targeting, now it's when do I actually launch a campaign? It's a frequently asked question. What I suggest people to do is actually go start finding out when conversions normally start happening to that given brand or to that given business on the daily basis. Normally, I actually find that there is increases in conversions typically starting around 6 a.m. local time, and normally sales will start to drop off around 9 or 10 p.m. at night. But if you start to look at day by day analysis and actually start compiling them together, what you'll notice is actually trend lines of when you typically have peaks in conversion throughout the day. And if you want to launch a new campaign, the best suggestion I'd have is take a look at when your conversions typically start happening and then schedule your campaigns to launch about 15 to 20 minutes prior to that period. I do this because I like it when my campaigns can initially fire off and immediately start getting signal and conversions, which I think might expedite the optimization process for the algorithm. So again, look at when conversions start coming in on average. Normally it's around that 5 or 6 or 7 a.m. mark, and then schedule your campaign to launch 15 to 20 minutes prior to that period. The next question I often get is, when should you really kill a campaign, or how long does a test really take? To this, I say that when you think of advertising, the gas to get more data is the amount of money you're spending. The more money you spend, the faster you'll get data and the faster you can make decisions. The less money you spend, it just takes longer for that data to really start coming in. Typically, a good foundation for a kill point on your campaign or ad set is 3 times your CPA. Meaning, if my CPA is $10 and that's what I can afford as a business, then realistically you can't make a decision until you've spent probably about $30 before moving on to the next test. So now the question is, how much do you want to spend, or how fast of data do you want to get in? You got to spend at least 3x CPA as a good foundation for cutting or deciding to pivot in a campaign. Now, when it comes to deciding whether or not something is being successful or has the potential for success, there are several different key metrics that you can look at in trying to gauge the future possibility of the campaign. The first thing is CPA, or the cost per action. This is typically aligned around what your end result is, meaning if you're optimizing for a purchase or optimizing for a lead or optimizing for a scheduled call. That CPA is ultimately your North Star when it comes to understanding if this campaign is going to be successful. However, there are other metrics you can use that essentially reverse engineer the metrics for what you can expect. The next one I typically like to look at is the cost per unique outbound click. What this means is ultimately, this is the cost to get someone, a unique individual user, to click off your ad and go to your website. Not just click somewhere on your ad or click to open your video, but actually to leave the platform. Because if you can use this metric, let's say your cost per unique outbound click is $1, and then you also understand that your conversion rate on the next page is at 10%, realistically, this means that your CPA or your lead or purchase or whatever it is $10. You get 10 people to the site and you have a 10% conversion rate, meaning you'll get 1 CPA purchase, lead, or whatever you're optimizing for. So I typically will use this, understanding also what the conversion rate is on the landing page, to actually predict or project what this ad set or campaign's CPA will become. However, you have to be careful when using metrics like this and using it universally, because not all traffic is equal when it comes to social media platforms. The quality of every click is not always the same. So in some situations, you might have a very high cost per click, but those users with a high cost per click actually have a higher conversion rate on the landing page. So it's always important to actually look at the backend numbers and reverse engineer from the data and let the data tell you what to do. There are other metrics like click-through rate, which is essentially the amount of people that see something and then ultimately click through to the website. There's CPMs, which is the cost to reach 1,000 people, or 1,000 impressions rather. And then you also have custom metrics that marketers like me and you should use to predict the success of your creative, like thumb stop ratio, meaning of how many impressions there are that see this creative, how many people actually see 3 seconds or have a through play. Or of the people who have watched a through play and actually have completed the video, this will typically start to tell you what parts of the creative are bringing success or causing failure. Now, when it comes to evaluating these metrics, most all of them except for your CPA are seen in first-party dashboards, meaning you can see it on the Facebook ads dashboard or Google or TikTok. These are very reliable because it doesn't require attribution or another website to communicate back to Meta on what actually happened. But when it comes to CPA, after iOS 14, this has become very difficult for a lot of marketers and brands to stay on top of. And realistically, what I've found in most accounts is if you get your tracking and attribution dialed in, you actually get your Meta pixel to be receiving the signal correctly, you'll fix a lot of errors that you probably are facing right now. To do this, you can use tools like Cappy or Conversion API, which is a native Meta integration, or you can use third-party apps like a Hyros or a Northbeam to supplement for this attribution. Ultimately, I really haven't found any platform or software that does this to 100% accuracy. However, using these tools will rapidly increase your performance of your advertising campaigns. So if you are a brand or a business owner and you don't have any of this set up and you don't have it set up well, I think this should be one of your highest priority action items, because I can't tell you how many accounts I've seen radically turned around just by getting the proper signals sent back to Facebook. One question I do get asked is, does engagement matter? How much does social proof on an ad really matter? And while I'd say holistically, it may not matter at the top level, what I can tell you is that social proof on an ad does make a very large impact for the longevity of that ad. If you've been running ads for any length of time, what you probably have noticed is that some of your accounts have 1 or 2 ads that just seem to beat everything else. I've even heard that people have duplicated and just made small iterations to that same ad, and they still can't seem to beat the control-based ad. 9 times out of 10, when I look at that control-based ad, it is because it's littered with positive social proof, likes, comments, and shares on that ad that can't be replicated by new ads. So realistically, if you want an ad to compete with that control, then you need a new ad that also has social proof behind it. This is because when an ad has a ton of engagement, comments, or shares, it instills the bandwagon effect. If nothing else, people pay more attention to it because it seems like everyone else is also. A quick hack and easy way to boost your ads conversion rates is to make sure you get more social engagement and comments happening within that ad. It's important to note that in the modern day age right now of media buying, when it comes to any platform, more and more control is being stripped away from media buyers. The algorithm and the machine learning of these platforms want more and more control so that their algorithm gets more signal and more data. When you understand this, it's important for you to start allocating much more of your time, effort, and energy into making great creative and making great offers. Understanding what business economics or what CPAs your business can actually afford while also focusing on the creative is going to be the key for you to survive and thrive in the coming future. So if your ad account has hundreds of campaigns, most likely you really need to consider adapting and shifting. While I've mentioned previously in this video that some accounts really need to try out every different tactic at all times to make sure they're leveraging different pockets of optimization, these accounts are spending over 50 grand a day or 100 grand a day to be able to do tactics like that, which the vast majority of media buyers out there are not working with accounts like that. If you have a standard account spending less than 25 grand a day, most likely you only need 3 to 5 campaigns in your account at any given time. Realistically, the machine learning and algorithm of these platforms do operate better when your campaigns are more broad. But this doesn't mean that you shouldn't be testing audiences in different segments to get more data as a marketer. And when it comes to guessing at what audiences your prospects are most likely in, I encourage you as a marketer to never be afraid to actually simply ask the market. There was one client that we had that was essentially a liquid supplement. They offered different hydration and immunity packs that people could simply just pour into their drink and take with them. The idea was that this was a very active lifestyle brand, and we assumed that the customers would also be an active lifestyle. So we were targeting hikers, we were targeting people who like to be outdoors, who like to kite surf, people who played sports or went to the gym. But after a while, our CPAs really started to increase and we needed to find a way to turn it around. What we decided to do was host a town hall with this brand's top customers, where the founder would come in and get to talk to the top customers from his past, the people with the highest LTVs, and start telling them about the new flavors, the new products they were going to come out with in the future. And who we thought would show up were active, fit, healthy people were actually people who were middle-aged and shopped at Walmart or Aldi's. And these people were really not into an active lifestyle. They just were looking for something to get them through the day, stay hydrated, and it tastes really good. As soon as we had that town hall, we switched our targeting on the ad platforms to things like Walmart, Bass Pro, parents with kids over the age of 12, and our CPAs cut in a third. This allowed us to scale this campaign way more than we ever thought possible, all because we realized we just need to ask the market who they are and what they like. You'll be surprised at the results you get back, and you'll never know what campaigns will radically turn around because your market was actually completely different than you thought. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and ultimately what I want you to do is leave this video, start testing these new strategies and tactics to leverage the power of the algorithm and the machine learning. At the end of the day, if you can learn to harness the power of it, but ultimately provide it more signal, you'll get better results and be able to scale much further and maintain profitability. And if you want more nerdy content like this, be sure to like and subscribe.